I'm Madison Clarke, 34, a senior cybersecurity advisor who climbed her way up from a public high school in Ohio to a position of global influence. 2 years ago, after nearly a decade of budgeting and skipping luxuries, I bought my dream coastal villa in Monterey, California, a peaceful retreat overlooking the Pacific, where the sound of waves felt like a reward for every sleepless night. I never thought my own parents would sell it behind my back while I was in Singapore on an extended contract. But they did, just to erase my sister's six-figure gambling debt. What they didn't realize is that their betrayal would tear the lid off secrets buried deeper than the shoreline cliffs. But before I get into what happened when I got back, drop a comment below and don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever had your family treat your accomplishments like a shared ATM. This story still shocks me when I say it out loud. I grew up in Akron, Ohio, in a quiet brick house on Willow Glen Drive. We weren't poor, but money was always tight. My parents, Janet and Robert Clarke, made their priorities clear without saying a word. My younger sister, Natalie, got piano lessons, prom dresses, and a used car at 16. I got a library card, thrift store shoes, and the phrase, "Life's not always fair." Natalie's poems made it to the fridge. My science trophies? Boxed up in the garage with Christmas lights. So, I worked. I studied. I said no to parties and yes to coding camps. Natalie coasted through school while I graduated top of my class and earned a full ride to Carnegie Mellon. That scholarship was my golden ticket, but I still had to hustle. Between classes, I worked at a bookstore, coded for local businesses, and picked up contract jobs in cybersecurity. My sleep-deprived roommate, Jenna, used to shake me awake at my desk and whisper, "Madison, you're going to burn out before you cash in." But I kept going. And when I landed my first role at a digital security firm in Seattle, I made more in a year than my parents had in 5. I remember calling home with the news. My mom's voice cracked with surprise. My dad simply said, "Don't get cocky." I didn't. I got smart and prepared for the moment they'd try to take what I built. And believe me, they did. Those tech companies crash all the time, my dad once muttered after I made Forbes' Rising Tech Leaders list. Meanwhile, Natalie had dropped out of a 2-year college in Dayton after just 1 semester. What followed were years of retail jobs, toxic boyfriends, and spiraling debt. Her first gambling problem surfaced when she was 24. She racked up $12,000 in credit card debt from weekend casino trips to Detroit with a guy named Trevor. My parents called me in a panic. I wired the money by the end of the day. "It's just a phase," my mother said, her voice trembling. "She's young. She'll grow out of it." She didn't. 2 years later, it was $22,000 in online blackjack losses. Then $33,500 lost on sports betting apps. Every time, my phone would ring with tears and guilt tripping. Every time, I sent the money. Part of me hoped I was helping. Most of me just didn't want to be the bad daughter. By the time I was 31, I had been promoted to Senior Vice President of Cybersecurity Development. My equity at the company matured the same month we closed a multi-million-dollar acquisition. I finally had the resources and the courage to buy something just for me. The Monterey villa cost $2.1 million, perched on a windswept bluff overlooking the Pacific. The first time I turned the key, I stood in the golden afternoon light flooding through the living room and cried. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because I had done it alone. No trust fund, no spouse, no shortcuts. I took my time furnishing the place. I selected every rug, chair, and piece of art with care. My workspace had a panoramic view of the sea. It wasn't just a home, it was my sanctuary. Eventually, I invited my parents and Natalie for a weekend visit. My father whistled as he walked from room to room, murmuring, "Fancy." My mother touched the furniture lightly and kept commenting on upkeep costs. Natalie, ever blunt, asked how many cameras were on the property and whether I had a fireproof safe. Over grilled salmon and wine on the deck, my mother said, "You really don't need all this for just one person. Feels excessive." I smiled and topped off her glass. I didn't buy it because I needed it. I bought it because I earned it. Later that night, I wrapped a blanket around my shoulders and sat on the beach alone, watching the moon's reflection ripple over the water. That house wasn't about luxury. It was about boundaries, about healing, about finally choosing me. I had no idea that my hard-won sanctuary would soon become ground zero for the most devastating betrayal of my life. When the Tokyo project came up, it felt like everything I'd worked for was aligning perfectly. Our firm was breaking into Asian cybersecurity markets, and as senior vice president, I was the obvious candidate to lead negotiations with our Japanese partners. This wasn't just another overseas assignment, this was a career-defining opportunity. If I nailed it, I'd likely be named Chief Operating Officer by the end of the quarter. 3 weeks in Tokyo. All expenses covered. A $50 million deal on the table. Over ramen bowls at our favorite downtown cafe, I told my best friend, Rebecca, my college roommate and longtime confidant. This could change everything. Rebecca leaned back, arching an eyebrow. You sure your family can survive 3 weeks without their personal bank? She wasn't completely joking. She'd seen the midnight Venmo requests, the pleading voicemails, the guilt-laced texts. They'll have to, I said. I already told them. No emergencies, no requests, no drama while I'm away. My assistant Jessica's got my backup info, but this trip is off limits. The weekend before I left, I stopped by my parents' place for dinner. Natalie was there, more curious than usual. So, the house will be empty? She asked casually, while stabbing her roasted carrots. No worries about, break-ins? I've got cameras, a private patrol, and neighbors who check in, I answered evenly, noticing how she exchanged a quick look with my dad. If you need someone to stay there, I'd be happy to, she offered, too quickly. Thanks, but everything's covered, I replied, then steered the conversation to safer territory. My first week in Tokyo was better than I could have hoped. The Japanese partners appreciated my clarity, and our talks moved fast. Each evening, I'd call Jessica back in Seattle to make sure things at home were calm. No red flags, nothing strange. Then, on the 10th night, as I reviewed slides for the final pitch, an email landed in my inbox. The subject line, Quick Family Update. It was from my dad. I clicked, expecting some mild update. Instead, the air drained from the room. Madison, your mom and I sold the Monterey house. Natalie's in trouble again, about $1.2 million. She needs a fresh start. We knew you'd understand. You never used all that space anyway. We've moved your things to our garage. Love, Dad. I read it 3 times. My chest tightened. My hands shook so violently, I dropped my phone on the carpet. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. And it broke something in me I didn't know could still break. This couldn't be real. They couldn't have sold the villa. They'd have needed my signature, wouldn't they? It was impossible. My hands shook as I dialed my father. No answer. I tried my mother's number. Straight to voicemail. Natalie? Nothing. Heart racing, I called Rachel, my neighbor 2 doors down from the Monterey house. She picked up after 2 rings. Oh, Madison? Her voice was hesitant, tinged with sympathy. There were people there yesterday, with a realtor. I saw your dad showing them around. I thought it was planned. The hotel room tilted. I felt the edge of the bed behind my knees and sank onto it, staring at the phone screen. I didn't even think. I called my attorney, Michael, back in Seattle. It was 3 a.m. there. They can't legally sell a home they don't own, he said, his voice groggy but concerned. You'd need to sign multiple closing documents. It would be fraud otherwise. But then a horrifying thought hit me. Years ago, when I had emergency surgery and was temporarily hospitalized, I had granted my father power of attorney. I couldn't remember ever officially revoking it. And they had a key, the one I gave them for emergencies, the day I moved in. That night passed in a fog of panic and disbelief. I managed to email Michael the property records and POA paperwork, barely noticing the sun rising over Tokyo through the hotel window. At 6 a.m., I got the confirmation I was dreading. The villa had been sold 3 days ago for $1.2 million, far under market value. My signatures looked legitimate. We'll have to bring in a forensic document examiner, Michael said. But I believe they forged your signature using older forms. I hung up and stumbled to the bathroom, where I threw up in the sink. My sanctuary, my dream, my symbol of freedom, gone. My own parents had sold it like it was a secondhand couch. For what? To bail Natalie out of yet another reckless spiral? You didn't need all that space anyway. The line from my father's email kept echoing in my mind, like my success was an indulgence, like it didn't belong to me. I still had a major presentation in 3 hours. I splashed cold water on my face, covered my swollen eyes with concealer, and put on my sharpest navy suit. I would not let them take this from me, too. I got through the pitch. The executives nodded, took notes, asked sharp questions. On the outside, I was composed, but inside, I was unraveling. Back in my room, a new email waited. Madison, please don't be upset about the house. You overreact to everything. Natalie really needed help this time. Love, Mom. These weren't just angry creditors, my mother had written. They were dangerous people. They threatened her, Madison. Family has to come first. Then came the dagger. You can always buy another vacation home with your big salary. Love, Mom, vacation home. As if the Monterey villa, my sanctuary, my reward, my first real home, was just some throwaway luxury item I'd picked up for fun. That single sentence flipped a switch in me. Hands trembling, but my mind sharp, I drafted an email. Not to my parents, not even to Natalie, but to the Monterey County Sheriff's Department, reporting a case of property theft, signature fraud, and identity misuse. Estimated value, $2.1 million. Holding it together during the final stages of high-stakes negotiations while your life is unraveling? That's a particular form of agony. Every dinner toast, every nod across a boardroom table, every firm handshake. It all felt like trying to smile through broken glass. Still, I showed up. I delivered. Then I collapsed each night in my hotel room, surrounded by legal pads and open tabs, California property laws, power of attorney abuse cases, forgery penalties. I created folders, timelines, backup drives. If nothing else, I could cling to facts, to structure. The morning after I filed the report, I received a secure video call from Detective Laura Morgan of the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. Her voice was steady, her tone matter-of-fact, but there was kindness in her eyes. Ms. Clarke, I want you to know, we're taking this very seriously. She explained they had already flagged the wire transfer and frozen the proceeds. The buyers had been contacted and were now aware that they'd purchased stolen property. What about my parents? I asked, unsure if I wanted the answer. That depends. We're building a case and we'll follow the evidence, but it would help if you could return to California soon. I sighed. I can't leave Tokyo until next week. We're closing a $50 million agreement. If I leave early, the entire deal is at risk. Understood, she said. We'll keep you updated every step of the way. Meanwhile, my phone exploded with texts from my parents. My father's tone shifted by the hour. From dismissive, "You're blowing this out of proportion," to enraged, "How dare you do this to your own family?" to desperate, "Please call them off. We'll fix this." My mother left weepy voicemails, trying to play the sympathy card. We were scared, Madison. Please understand. Natalie's life was on the line. But Natalie? Not a word. No call, no message, just silence from the person whose disaster had cost me everything. By the third day after I filed the police report, I couldn't keep up the facade. My exhaustion, the panic, the grief, it all started to show. During a working lunch with our Japanese partners, I accidentally knocked over a water glass and just stood there, frozen, as it spread across the table. I didn't even reach for a napkin. Tears welled up and spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. Amanda Chin, my boss, my mentor, the woman who championed me from the start, stood quietly and guided me out of the room. She didn't ask questions until we were in the privacy of her hotel suite. Madison, something's clearly going on. Talk to me. I rarely showed vulnerability in professional settings, but the dam broke. Between gasps and shaking hands, I told her everything. The forged sale of my villa, the legal battle, the betrayal that was unraveling while I was trying to land the biggest deal of my career. Amanda didn't blink. No corporate platitudes, no cold suggestions to focus on the job. Instead, she listened. And then, unexpectedly, she shared something personal. My father embezzled from his company when I was in college. He used my name on the accounts. she said quietly. It took me 5 years to clear my credit. Family betrayal, especially financial. It sticks to your bones. She picked up the phone and had her assistant reschedule meetings, giving me breathing room. The deal matters, Madison, but not more than you. We're not machines. Let us help. By that evening, I had resources I hadn't known were available: corporate legal support, tech forensics contacts, and time carved out for critical calls. Detective Morgan filled in the latest updates. My parents had used the spare key I'd given them for emergencies. They had shown the realtor a long-expired power of attorney, combined with the key, insider knowledge, and digitally forged versions of my old signature. It had looked legitimate enough to fool a rushed closing. The buyers are from New York, Morgan told me. They genuinely thought they were getting a steal on a Monterey oceanfront property. They're devastated. And the money? I asked. That's the twist. We traced $400,000 to a payment made directly to Golden Horizon Casino in Atlantic City. The remaining $800,000 went to an offshore account in the Caymans. It's not in your parents' or sisters' names. That made my stomach drop. Natalie's debt was $400,000. Where did the rest go? When I wasn't fielding legal updates or managing investor calls, I stared out at the Tokyo skyline. Numb. The villa had never just been real estate. It had been everything. My freedom, my future, my proof. And now, it was gone. I'd lost more than a home. I'd lost my sense of safety, my belief that the people who were supposed to protect me could at least be trusted not to destroy me. The idea that they had viewed my greatest accomplishment as something they could simply liquidate, it cut deeper than I expected. My final week in Tokyo blurred by. Still, against all odds, we closed the deal. $53 million, surpassing projections. Amanda and I toasted quietly with sake on our last night. You've demonstrated extraordinary resilience, she said, her eyes warm. COO is yours when we're back stateside. Not many people could pull off what you just did under this kind of pressure. I smiled, but the weight in my chest never lifted. Flying back into Boston, the skyline that once felt like home now looked foreign. I wasn't returning to my oceanside villa, but to a hotel room, and a criminal investigation involving my own blood. Detective Morgan met me at Logan Airport. Her face was drawn, professional, but I could tell things had escalated. We interviewed your sister, she said on the ride downtown. Her story doesn't match your parents. Natalie admits to owing roughly $400,000, not $1.2 million. So they inflated the debt to justify the sale, I murmured, the betrayal somehow stinging all over again. We're tracking the remaining funds. The sale remains frozen. The villa is off limits until the forensic team finishes their assessment. That night, I sat in a silent hotel room, surrounded by neutral tones and cold lighting, staring at the ceiling. Something darker was unfolding. This wasn't just about favoritism or poor decisions. It felt calculated, strategic. The next morning, I met with Marcus Wright, a private investigator my company's legal counsel recommended. He was ex-FBI, broad-shouldered with a calm demeanor and a wall of diplomas and commendations behind him. Family financial crimes are more common than you'd think, he explained from his office near Boston Harbor. But yours stands out, for the sheer scope and the money still unaccounted for. I gave him full clearance to investigate every account, asset, and possible transaction connected to my parents and sister. 3 days later, he called, urgency in his voice. I need you to come in, now. When I arrived, his office wall was covered in photos, charts, and timelines. He gestured to a grainy surveillance still of a tall, sharp-featured man. Natalie's boyfriend, James Mercer. He's not just a gambler. He has confirmed ties to organized loan sharks operating in Atlantic City and Boston. He's been under investigation for wire fraud and racketeering, but has slipped through every time. My breath caught. This wasn't just betrayal. It was something far more dangerous. Is Natalie in danger? I asked, my voice tight. Possibly, Marcus Wright replied, pinning another document to the board. But not in the way your parents described. He pointed to a highlighted bank transfer. This is from your father's retirement account. $125,000. moved into an LLC registered under James Mercer's name. It happened 8 months ago, well before the villa sale. My stomach twisted. So my father was paying Mercer directly? That's where it gets messy, Wright said, pulling up a spreadsheet. Here's a pattern of transfers over 2 years. It paints a very different picture. He handed me printed statements. Your father has his own gambling problem, a serious one. These payments suggest he's been borrowing from Mercer's network, probably underground bookmakers, and paying off loans with staggering interest. I leaned back, stunned. My father, the man who'd scolded me for spending $12 on takeout in college, was a gambling addict. And Natalie? I asked. According to interviews with former associates of Mercer, she got into gambling after your father brought her to casinos, said it was about understanding calculated risk. It's a textbook case of generational addiction. He passed it down, whether he meant to or not. Over the next several days, the full scope came into focus, thanks to Wright's digging, forensic audits, and ongoing police cooperation. My father owed nearly $600,000 to Mercer's crew. In a panic, he'd borrowed heavily from my mother's inheritance without her knowing. When Natalie's separate $400,000 crisis hit, the villa became their only quick solution. The extra $800,000? That wasn't for Natalie. It was to cover my father's hidden debts. They hoped to disappear the problem, paper over the cracks, and move on, assuming I'd never challenge them. I met with Harold Greenbaum, our family's longtime attorney. He looked 10 years older than I remembered. I advised against the sale. He confessed quietly. Your father insisted it was all done with your consent. I should have reached out directly, Madison. That was a mistake. A serious one. As the legal process moved forward, I arranged to retrieve a few personal items from the villa. The new buyers, Daniel and Sarah Williams, a physician couple from Manhattan, met me there under police escort. We're so sorry, Sarah said, visibly shaken. We thought we were buying a summer home. We didn't know it was stolen. I thanked them for their kindness and stepped inside. My sanctuary was now part crime scene, part half-moved-in stranger's home. In my former office, I walked to the nautical map hanging on the far wall, one detail I'd never shared with anyone. Behind it, a safe. My fingers hesitated on the combination. I wasn't sure what I hoped to find, but I knew whatever remained inside would be untouched. Mine and mine alone. If you've ever faced a betrayal that shook you to your core, don't forget to subscribe, because what I found inside that hidden safe changed everything. And the truth I uncovered next will leave you breathless. Inside the hidden wall, safe were my most valuable possessions, birth certificate, title deeds, heirloom jewelry from my grandmother, and a backup hard drive I hadn't touched in years. I had stored it there just in case. That case had finally arrived. The hard drive held meticulously organized financial records, every bank transfer I'd made for Natalie's so-called emergencies, every dollar loaned to my parents, every message or voicemail that had accompanied those desperate requests. But more importantly, it also contained security footage from cameras I'd installed 2 years ago, after Natalie's boyfriend Mercer had asked too many questions about my home theater system and started dropping by unannounced. Detective Morgan and I reviewed the footage, and it delivered the most damning evidence yet. There were multiple recordings of my family walking potential buyers through my home before I ever left for Tokyo. In one clip, my father sat at my desk, practicing my signature on scratch paper while referencing old tax forms. In another, my mother laughed on the phone. Madison's too wrapped up in her big deal career. She'll never check the title records. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment betrayal. This was a coordinated theft, premeditated and callous. As Detective Morgan and my legal team compiled the case, I couldn't stop asking the same question. Why? Why go to these lengths when they weren't destitute? Why lie when I had always helped? The answer came from someone I hadn't spoken to in months. My Aunt Patricia, my mother's older sister. She called after hearing what happened. Your dad's gambling started right after he was passed over for a partnership, she said quietly, from her home in San Diego. Your mom kept it hidden for years. She took out loans, dipped into her own inheritance. They've been pretending, Madison, keeping up appearances while the debt piled higher. It all fit. My rapid rise, my salary eclipsing my father's, my independence. It didn't inspire them. It threatened them. It shattered their story that the world was unfair, that success was always a matter of luck. I had proven otherwise, and they couldn't stand it. They pulled Natalie into it too, Patricia added, voice trembling. She's a mess now, because they taught her how to lose. That's when I realized this wasn't about a villa. It was about power, control, and the desperate, toxic need to tear down what they couldn't understand or match. 2 weeks after returning from Tokyo, I told my attorney I needed to face them. He advised against it, but I had to hear the lies fall from their lips in person. Detective Morgan agreed to stay parked down the street, not to intervene unless she had to. Their house looked exactly the same. Neatly trimmed lawn, wind chimes on the porch, the old wooden swing where I used to sit with library books and noise-canceling headphones to drown out the shouting inside. It was surreal. The world looked untouched, but everything had changed. My father answered the door, his jaw clenched in what I recognized as a mix of shame and defiance. Behind him, my mother hovered near the entryway, her face drawn and eyes puffy from tears. She looked smaller somehow, fragile. "You've really done it this time," my father growled as I stepped inside. "Bringing in the police, against your own family." I didn't sit. I didn't even take off my coat. "You forged my signature. You sold my home. You lied to me for years." "We had no choice," my mother snapped, voice brittle. "Natalie was in danger. These weren't people you could say no to." $400,000, I said sharply. "That's what Natalie owed, not $1.2 million. So where's the other $800,000, Dad?" The Coved 5-5 lore drained from his face. My mother turned to him, confused. "What is she talking about, Robert?" That's when I realized she might not know. Detective Morgan had hinted at inconsistencies in their stories, but I hadn't expected this kind of split. I pulled out my tablet and opened the file of bank transfers. Everything Marcus Wright had traced. "Here," I said, 8 months of payments from your retirement fund to 5 shell companies, all tied to James Mercer." My father sputtered. "Those were investments." "In what? Mercer's private black hole of debt?" I asked. "What kind of investment charges 48% interest and comes with muscle at the door?" My mother sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "Robert, what have you done?" And just like that, my father collapsed under the weight of his secrets. His posture slumped, and for the first time, he looked every day of his 68 years. "It started with weekend trips to the casinos," he whispered. "After the firm passed me over, I didn't know how to tell you. I used some of your mom's inheritance. Then I introduced Natalie to blackjack. Said it was just for fun." He paused, eyes glistening. "The $800,000 was for me. Mercer's people threatened to go to my old firm, expose everything." "So you stole from your daughter," I said, my voice cracking. "You've always been so strong, Madison. So capable," my mother said softly, as if that somehow made it okay. "Natalie needs us more. She's not strong like you," my mother murmured. I stared at her. "That's not a compliment." She blinked. "You're saying I'm easier to exploit because I bounce back? That you take from me because I can recover? That's not love. That's convenience." "We were going to pay you back," my father said weakly. "Once things turned around." "Things haven't turned around in 15 years, I interrupted. "This stopped being about money a long time ago. This is about respect, trust. 2 things you've shown I can't expect from you." I reached into my bag and placed a slim folder on the coffee table between us. "Here are your options." My parents looked at the folder as if it might explode. Option 1, full cooperation with the investigation. Written confessions, complete transparency with the forensic accountants, and you both enter gambling addiction treatment. If you do that, I'll speak to the prosecutor on your behalf. I let that land. Option 2, you continue this lie, and I pursue the maximum charges available. From this point forward, we speak only through attorneys. "You'd send your own parents to prison?" my father asked, aghast. I looked him in the eye. "You stole your daughter's home and forged her signature. If that's what family means to you, then yes, I'm following your example." The silence that followed felt heavier than anything words could fix. Finally, I asked, "Where's Natalie now?" My mother's shoulders slumped. "We don't know. She disappeared after the police came by. She's not answering." And then, as if summoned by the weight of the moment, the front door creaked open. Natalie stepped in, pale, thinner than I remembered, eyes sunken and rimmed with shadows. When she saw me, she froze. "Madison," she whispered, "I never thought they'd actually sell your house." "But you brought buyers through it," I said. She collapsed onto the nearest chair. "James told me it was just for an insurance appraisal. Then Dad handed over the money, said James had investment plans. When I found out the truth, I tried to stop it, but I didn't know how." "You could have called me," I said. "I couldn't. James took my phone. He's been monitoring everything." She rolled up her sleeve, finger-shaped bruises. "I got away yesterday. I've been sleeping in my car, trying to figure out what to do." Something shifted in the air. Natalie wasn't just complicit. She was trapped in the mess they all helped create, and I had enabled it by always being the fixer. "We're all responsible," I said softly, "but this ends now." I slid the paper across the table. Full confessions, financial transparency, treatment, and a restraining order against James Mercer. "In exchange," I told them, "I'll ask the DA to focus charges on rehabilitation instead of punishment." My father blinked in disbelief. "Why would you help us after what we did?" I looked him square in the eye. "I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for me." Because holding onto this rage would only poison me in the end. But I needed them to understand. This wasn't forgiveness, not in the traditional sense. "Our relationship will never be the same," I added. "Trust is like a mirror. You can glue it back together, but you'll always see the cracks." I turned and walked out the front door. Detective Morgan stepped from her unmarked car, waiting at the curb. "They'll be contacting you soon to give full statements," I said quietly. "All of them." "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice gentle. "No," I answered truthfully, "but I will be." What followed was an exhausting legal process that stretched across months. My parents kept their word. Both submitted detailed confessions that matched everything our investigation had uncovered. Natalie's testimony turned out to be the linchpin. She described James Mercer's manipulation, the financial control, and the slow, emotional unraveling that had left her unable to think clearly or reach out for help. 2 weeks later, Mercer was arrested at a casino in Atlantic City. Thanks to the thoroughness of the case and my request for a rehabilitative path, the district attorney agreed to a measured resolution. My father was sentenced to 6 months in a minimum security facility, followed by 5 years probation and mandatory addiction counseling. My mother received probation, community service, and was required to attend financial therapy. Natalie entered inpatient treatment focused on both trauma recovery and gambling addiction. "I kept thinking I could win it all back," she told me during a supervised visit, "that I'd fix it. Every loss just made me try harder. It was like I was possessed." The restitution process for the villa was murky. The sale was voided, but the Williams couple had already invested time and money. Instead of uprooting them, I offered a temporary lease until the criminal proceedings were resolved. If I chose to sell later, they'd get the first offer. Meanwhile, I couldn't keep living out of hotels. That's when Rebecca, my oldest friend, called. "You're not staying in some cold hotel," she said. "The guest house is yours for as long as you need." As we moved my boxes in together, I felt the first glimmer of peace. And at work, to my surprise, my colleagues didn't back away. They leaned in. They rallied. Turns out, resilience doesn't scare the right kind of people. Amanda formally announced my promotion to Chief Operating Officer during a Monday morning all-hands meeting. She made it a point to highlight not just my work ethic, but the resilience and leadership I'd shown while navigating immense personal challenges. The applause was genuine. And the most surprising part? It came from people I hadn't let in before. The colleagues I'd kept at arm's length for years had quietly organized a fundraiser to help offset my legal costs. Jessica, my assistant, spent her weekends sorting through financial documents with me, rebuilding spreadsheets, flagging transactions, creating backups. "You've always treated everyone here with respect," she told me when I tried to thank her. "People notice that. It's why we want to help. As the legal process stretched on, I learned I wasn't alone. The district attorney referred me to an advocacy group for victims of family financial fraud. I sat in those support meetings week after week, slowly unpacking the emotional damage. It wasn't just about money, it was about betrayal. That's where I met Diana, a nurse whose mother drained her college fund to fuel a compulsive shopping habit. We bonded over late-night coffee and our shared understanding. Family financial abuse is different, Diana said one evening. People expect you to forgive because it's your family, but they broke that trust long before we filed the paperwork. These connections helped me survive the moments of doubt, the guilt, the whispers, the unsolicited advice from people who said I should just move on. 4 months after the fraudulent sale, the authorities recovered around $650,000 of the missing funds. Mercer had moved the money through layered shell accounts, but forensic accountants froze large portions in time. The funds were transferred into a court-controlled restitution account while the criminal cases proceeded. Meanwhile, my old neighborhood in Monterey came through in a way I hadn't expected. Several neighbors submitted statements, and one, Mrs. Henderson from across the street, had even taken photographs of my parents showing the villa to strangers while I was still in Tokyo. "You adored that home," she said over a quiet cup of tea. "There's no way you would have sold it without being here." After Mercer's arrest exposed a broader fraud ring across the East Coast, media attention exploded. I declined most interviews, but agreed to one with a financial crimes journalist. The article didn't focus on family drama. It spotlighted financial abuse patterns, including a growing but lesser-known trend: parents exploiting the assets of successful adult children. Soon, more victims came forward. "The courage you showed, pursuing charges despite the family ties, it opened the door," the prosecutor told me. "Your sister wasn't the only one being controlled. Mercer's reach went further than we imagined." Mercer's operation, as investigators eventually confirmed, was meticulously designed. He sought out families with addiction vulnerabilities, gambling, spending, even substance abuse, then manipulated relationships to access greater financial control. Understanding the system he used didn't excuse what my parents and Natalie had done, but it helped me see the bigger picture. They weren't just perpetrators. They were also victims, caught in a cycle they couldn't recognize until it was too late. While the court proceedings pressed on, I began slowly piecing my life back together. I started therapy with Dr. Meredith Lewis, a specialist in family betrayal and financial trauma. She helped me learn to set firm boundaries without being driven by rage. I began reconnecting with friends I'd let slip away during my years of workaholism. I even opened my heart to dating again, this time with a clearer understanding of what vulnerability and honesty truly looked like. 6 months after that soul-shattering email in Tokyo, I found myself standing on the balcony of my leased apartment overlooking Boston Harbor. It wasn't my beloved Monterey villa, but it was peaceful. It was mine. It was a start. That evening, my phone rang. It was Detective Morgan. "The judge just issued the final ruling on the asset recovery," she said. "With the restitution from your parents and the funds recovered from Mercer's shell accounts, you'll receive approximately $1.1 million. Not the full $2.1 million value of the villa, but still, a victory." I closed my eyes. "Thank you," I said, meaning it. "There's one more thing," she added. "Your sister's cooperation helped us identify 3 more victims of similar schemes. The DA wanted you to know. Because you stood firm, others are now reclaiming what they lost, too." As I hung up, the sun was setting over the harbor, casting gold and rose across the water, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something like peace. The money mattered. Yes, it was validation, restitution. But more valuable was knowing that my refusal to stay silent had helped protect others. 6 months had passed, and everything had changed. And yet, sometimes, I still woke expecting to hear the Pacific. With my salary as COO and the recovered funds, I bought a modest cottage on the North Shore. Not oceanfront like the villa, but close enough to smell the salt air. It wasn't about replacing what I'd lost. It was about choosing something for myself, smaller, Simpler, but solid. Entirely mine. In one of our first sessions, Dr. Lewis had said, "You're grieving multiple losses." She was right. It wasn't just the physical home I had lost. It was the illusion of the family I thought I knew, the story I'd told myself about our relationships, and the quiet confidence I once had in my own safety. Dr. Lewis helped me uncover the hardest truth of all. Forgiveness doesn't require reconciliation. I could release my anger, for my sake, without inviting those who hurt me back into my life to do it again. My parents completed their sentences with mixed levels of self-awareness. My father, after resisting therapy at first, eventually embraced the process. In one of our supervised sessions, he looked me in the eye for the first time in years. "I've been living a double life for over 15 years, he said, voice low. "And honestly, there's relief in finally being seen for who I really am, even if that person is deeply flawed." My mother took longer to break through. She repeated the same refrain over and over. I was just trying to protect everyone. It wasn't until our fourth session that she finally broke down. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "I failed all of you. I failed myself." Natalie's recovery was perhaps the most surprising and the most hopeful. Away from our parents and no longer under Mercer's influence, she began to face hard truths about herself and the role she'd played. "They needed me to be helpless," she said one day in a therapy circle. "Your success scared them, Madison. But my failures? They made sense of the world they built." 3 months into her treatment, Natalie enrolled in community college. She chose accounting. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "I get numbers," she told me with a smile when I visited her campus. "I just used that understanding the wrong way before. Now, I want to build with it." My relationship with her shifted into something quieter, steadier. Not the closeness of childhood, but something rooted in mutual respect and new boundaries. No longer savior and saved. With my parents, I kept more distance. We spoke occasionally, met quarterly under supervision, but I no longer disclosed my personal or financial details. Rebuilding trust would take years, if it ever fully returned. But in the meantime, I leaned on the family I chose. Rebecca, who opened her guest house without hesitation, became the sister I told everything to. Jessica, once my assistant, became a true friend who understood my ambition and stood by me without judgment. And the support group? They became my community, people who knew this journey. We celebrated every hard-won legal victory and every quiet emotional milestone together. Some reconciled, others walked away. Some members of our support group had chosen permanent separation from their families. Others rebuilt relationships with careful structure. No path was framed as better, only what each person needed to heal. I chose to create something lasting from my experience. With a portion of the recovered funds, I established a small foundation dedicated to supporting victims of family financial abuse. Partnering with trauma therapists and legal advocates, we created resources, emergency funds, and private networks to help others navigate the painful crossroads between loyalty and self-preservation. "Financial abuse doesn't leave bruises," I said during our foundation's first public event. "But it creates invisible wounds that shape every relationship going forward, unless we choose to confront and heal them." Through helping others, I found meaning in my own story. Each person we helped reminded me that standing up for myself hadn't been selfish. It had been necessary, not just for me, but for others trapped in the same silence and shame I once carried. New traditions slowly replaced the old. Gone were the tense holidays filled with unspoken pain. In their place, chosen family dinners filled with laughter, honesty, and people who celebrated my happiness instead of resenting it. I began traveling not to escape, but to enrich my life, bringing home stories and snapshots to share with those who genuinely cared. No performance, no proving, just presence. On the 1-year anniversary of that first email from Tokyo, I visited the Monterey villa one final time. The Williams family had legally purchased it after the case closed, and they graciously allowed me this closure. I walked along the beach where I once wept for everything I thought I'd lost. But something had changed. The villa no longer held me emotionally. It was beautiful, yes, But it was just a house. The real sanctuary I had built was within, in honesty, in healthy relationships, and in a security that could never be sold out from under me. That night, back at my North Shore cottage, I wrote letters to each family member. Not to send, but to release. To my father, you confused worth with wealth, and in doing so, lost what mattered most. To my mother, shielding people from consequences is not love. It is control dressed as care. To Natalie, you were never weak. You just believed you were because it served others. And to myself, your boundaries are not cruelty. Your healing is not selfish. Your forgiveness is for you, not for them. Breaking generational cycles isn't just about refusing to repeat behavior. It's about exposing the beliefs underneath them. That love means financial rescue. That loyalty means silence. That success must be sacrificed for others' comfort. The peace I found wasn't perfect. Some mornings still hurt. But it was real, built on truth, boundaries, and the decision to finally choose myself. If you've made it this far, thank you for walking with me through this journey. I didn't share my story to seek pity or revenge. I shared it because I know I'm not alone. Family betrayal, financial manipulation, and the shame that follows, these things thrive in silence. And silence is what I chose for too long. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What would you say to someone like me, standing at the edge of trust and truth? If you've ever had to choose between peace and people, between healing and habit, share your thoughts in the comments. I read every word. This story may have started with my voice, but your experiences, your advice, your support, they matter just as much. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Protecting your peace is not selfish. Setting boundaries is not betrayal. Loving someone doesn't mean destroying yourself to save them. Please hit subscribe if you believe in reclaiming your power, even when it comes at a cost. Let's build a space where people can speak honestly about hard things and be better for it. Because healing isn't just personal, it's contagious. And maybe your courage will help someone else take their first step too.